Are there things that men can't face up to, don't want to face up to, or simply have no need to confront? That's the title of it. On the holiday calendar of one city were listed celebrations of Poor People's Day, Sick People's Day, Old People's Day, even Lonely People's Day, but not one of Dumb People's Day. You figure this omission is purposeful? I mean, consider. In their overall pursuit of entertainment, they unflinchingly glorify that which is base and regressive in man's behavior. So why the lack of specific commemoration of the sluggish mental state, which is the most visible and immediately apparent source of such behavior? Yeah, who but the few want to know more than they actually need to? And of course, oh yeah, no one can be said to be dumb, stupid, or living in a daze who has not already, with some success, struggled to escape therefrom. So, from an expanded mental position, none can be said to be actually ill who have not at some time been actually well. In one land, mystics who live past the age of 50 are driven from the city due to their later year tendencies to become mere social critics. In the world of thought, if you can only be right by others being wrong, you're not right. A lad asked his dad, is it better that the blind never even get a glimpse of the world? And the old man replied, have you been watching that cable show again? To the alert ear, everything life says to man, it prefaces with a loud, yo! A viewer writes, I'd like to know more about that story you read that claimed a hormone had been discovered that distorts the way we think. I'll bet you would. A man wrote to the doctor who knows everything and asked him, how can you make people snap out of it? You can't, he replied. On one world, the ultimate disguise and defense of anyone who knew the secret was to appear to be a comedian of some kind. According to legend, there was once a planet on which the thinking creatures began to develop too quickly, and life took care of the situation by giving them serious ears. And from somewhere in this galaxy, a voice said, is that supposed to be a joke? Deep down in the recesses of one man's skull, his thinking looked around and noted, it sure is weird in here. Since all submit, only the unenlightened feel fatalistic. Cal's uncertain of Chicago's location can't fully enjoy the train ride. Those who know, know, and those who don't, don't. End of story. Today's literary news. Only ordinary people have a biography. For Halloween, one man would dress up as Commander Obvious, but his costume never won a prize since no one could see him. How to escape the confinement of natural thought. Go to a place where there is no up or down, left or right, true or false, and there will you first discover freedom. Ships going nowhere in particular have the most passenger faces staring out of portholes. The question ordinary minds never attempt, is the human experience determined by the mind, or is the mind merely a recorder of same? And a less than objective one at that. One man gave his natural mental conclusions the dismissive name, yeah. A man once discovered a new oasis in the desert, but when he told the others back to the old one, none were interested. And for a while he continued to talk about it, then lost interest himself. Do you mean that he himself lost interest in his discovery, or that he lost interest in talking about it to disinterested ears? New discoveries are always but a few sand grains away. One way by which life keeps unscheduled discoveries from unsettling the overall routine of things is by causing men to eventually establish a systemized organization around the discovery. Once every 8 years or so, one man would gather together all of his presently active thoughts, theories, beliefs, opinions, hunches, dreams, etc., and direct them all to form a line. Arrange yourselves according to age, height, weight, or whatever you want to do, and when they'd done so, and we're all neatly lined up in a single file, he'd shoot them all, dead. One man's poem, ideas of change make me uneasy, and uncertain moves tend to make me queasy. When conditions shift, I feel like a whore, and so saying this, nailed his feet to the floor. Permanency, the elusive family name of middle-class minds. There was once a time in which men could entertain extraordinary ideas only after the one who had originally thought them had gone. One man was held captive in a tall building, and though he was eventually able to get partially free from his upper story captors, the lower floor ones were another story altogether. The meaner dominant wolf leading a pack can seem to the subordinate ones to possess mystical powers. The benefit in being less than fully committed to the quest is in the fun you can still have just hearing about it. The unrecognized chronology of man is that he physically lives 70 years while mentally dead 50. The unstable reminder to the interested is that the ordinary mind hears all unexpected observations of man as criticism and are thus able to resist and even deny them. There is a fairgrounds known to but a few, wherein is collected all things pleasant and all things not. It is known to those there as the objective familiarity with life. The simple like to hang out with those even more simple so they can pretend to help them. Today's fact, you're not fully awake or enlightened until you're more so than anyone you've ever heard of. One man's song, it's easy when it's greasy and rough when it's not, and so saying that, file the corners off his brain. At city level, there are two major ready audiences for things which seem mystical. The first group consists of those who want to sound simple and specific, and the other of those who want theirs vague and occult. And remember, right now we're just talking about ordinary minds and ears. One man named the bridge that connected his right frontal lobe to his left one. Sequence makes me sick. The history of man is whatever life wants it to be. Thus, the uselessness of looking outside yourself to see where he has been. Taking up a temporary position on the hillside, not normally occupied, a man looked out and pondered. Which is the more pathetic, men's routine belief in the mystical or the standard ways in which they attempt to pursue it? And as soon as he was sure you had heard that, he left. Rather than curing gum disease, there is a way in which you can brush that will make it worse. Thus, the mystic's reminder, rinse out your mind after every lifetime. Going to pull out another piece of what would appear to be, or what was considered to be history, something, in fact, in the last half a centennial. And remind anyone who might be watching this for the first time or so, the interest here is nothing to do with history, nothing to do with ordinary life. And the only reason I'm pulling it out is there's some things that cannot be talked about directly, and in this case, it is in line with what we were discussing for the last couple of times, having to do with the fact that within one man's lifetime, it is only the individual that has any potential and not the collective of humanity. Within the last 50 years or so, something happened in the history of man that seemed to be a sign of progress for man, the collective. But I would like to point out to you that it is on the collective level, on the widespread level, all such as this, as I'm going to attempt to get you to consider and then to drag it into your own nervous system, it is all, at the collective level, sort of like false labor to a pregnant woman. Is that there are signs, there are fields, there are claims within the collective of humanity, just as a pregnant woman saying, I'm about to deliver, I'm about to undergo a certain change, and it turns out to be not quite the case. The incident I have in mind, prior to 50 or 60 years ago, and it has to do with warfare and the political aftermath. Up until 50 or 60 years ago, any idea of holding combatants responsible for their wartime activities was unheard of. It was only in the last 50 years or so It popped up right after one conflict. It popped up the idea that the loser, which you should understand that, the winner never has to answer for what happened. But the loser, based upon extraordinarily egregious acts against civilians, they decided, the victors decided, and the victors in this case happened to be, the collective advance guard of Western civilization, which is just another way to say the collective advancement of humanity in general. And it was decided that the losing powers had committed such atrocious acts against civilians. They had to pick that out because it makes no sense to hold the actual active combatants responsible, because if country X decides to attack country Y, and in both cases, the one who's attacking will always claim to have some patriotic purpose in mind, and so therefore all the young men that they draft in are patriots. And of course, once they announce their intention to attack their neighbor has to round up an army, and everyone who volunteers or is conscripted is considered to be patriotic to defend their own home territory. And so they cannot come up with holding the combatants responsible, because a soldier has one job. That's to kill enemy soldiers. But now I want you to consider, and trying to remind you people, this has nothing whatsoever to do with history. It's just irrelevant. But I am showing you a prime example that I thought perhaps some of you are old enough that you were either around or you've read about, because it's fairly recent history as opposed to some of the tacky attempts that were suggested right after the Peloponnesian Wars. I mean, they didn't amount to anything. Of course, the main one being that they thought we should change the name of this, or people are going to laugh at it thousands of years from now, just see like you people did. That they thought we should come up with a more serious name, because sure as hell by the time this gets translated, and they're just guessing. But I just happen to know this. We're talking about 2,500 years ago, around the Mediterranean, them saying, after all the honorable deeds and our heroic efforts, you just wait and see. It's going to end up 2,000 or 3,000 years from now. There's going to be civilized people singing in some other part of the world, and somebody mentioned the Peloponnesian Wars, and people go. But at any rate, back to the serious subject. Remembering what I'm pointing out, this is a kind of false bloom of the weather getting too warm, and plants put out little bulbs too soon, or like the false labor. It is a sign. It is always humanity, life making humanity talk about that which is over the horizon. But as far as it having any real specific effect in one man's lifetime, it does not. And that's why I decided to pull out this example, because some of you lived through the time and just didn't notice it. But at any rate, so here it is. We have, let's say in the Western world, 3,000 to 5,000 years of fairly reliable recorded history. I'm just using Earth people's claim about that. And up until only 50 years ago, out of that history, there was never any question of holding combatants. I mean, it's already been pointed out by ordinary people that the history of man, in one sense, is the history of warfare. So it's been nothing but continual warfare. But it's only been, out of this 4,000 or 5,000 years worth of known warfare, it's only been 50 years ago that someone came up with the idea, after the affair was settled, that the winners came up with the idea that the losers had acted in such an uncivilized manner that they should be held responsible. It was the first time it was known as war trials, that they were going to try the people, the losers, not because they lost, because how much worse can it be than you lost, but then after it was over. Now, I want you to consider what's going on now. And any of you who may be trying to, no great effort to figure out what the actual hardwired examples were that occurred in life from which I'm taking this, just forget all that. Just X and Y, just powers. It is opposing forces. It is the attempt of life making humanity continue to march forward, and everybody's back and forth from the left leg to the right leg, from country X to country Y, from religion Z to religion Z squared. But here was the first time, and it would appear to be, even though those involved did not analyze at the time. But now I can point out to you, it would appear to be that we are about to. We're on the verge of perhaps a real quantum step forward in the history of man's civilization, or in the civilizing of man. Because for thousands of years, men have, after the fact, been bemoaning the fact that they continue to engage in warfare. But it goes on. But it would appear to be that they just got through with another several decades on and off of the biggest warfare of all, the big war, they thought it was. It was going to be the, anyway, it was the biggest war that's ever been known. And here it is over. Clear-cut victor, clear-cut loser. But it would appear to be, after a few months, it began to be talk about that this cannot be the end of it, because this particular warfare, the loser acted in such an uncivilized, a totally abhorrent, unacceptable manner that we can't just settle for the fact that he surrendered. They have got to, something's got to happen. So they came up with the idea of war crimes. Now consider what this is. One more time, let me remind you, and forget politics, forget warfare, because all this is a mental representation, a mental mapping of still intrinsic struggles in the life of man. But it would appear to be, for the first time, that we're showing signs that humanity, the more civilized aspects of humanity, were about to absolutely have enough of warfare, or they were showing signs of it, that was reaching a brand new point, a brand new level of distaste for it, perhaps the burgeoning sign that we were outgrowing the old feral need to engage in armed conflict. And the sign of it being, for the first time, the losers lost. They've been stomped on the ground. We've taken everything they got. They surrendered unconditionally. And for 5,000 years, what else can you ask for? Whether it be countries or whether you be in a bar fighting a guy and you beat him up and you kick each other around, throw him down and go through all that. And finally he's laying there and you're choking him or about to hit him again. He goes, no, that's it. Well, what else do you want? You can try to rub his nose in and say, all right, cry uncle. You know, kiss my feet. You know, do something. I had enough. So you would think, well, that's it. But moving into the collective of humanity, ooh, that much? Well, it could be. The collective of humanity. What I want you to consider was that at the time, it was seen, again, nobody was actually analyzing it in the way I am, but it was seen as being the signs of the promising signs, the potential signs of a real step forward for humanity. That thank God the war's over. That's what this means. The war's over. I guess I've been eating too much Italian food. The war is over, and ordinarily that should have been it. But what seemed to be this most promising sign was that even the victors, which a victor normally, for a victor to be a victor, that's the prize. The war is over, you won. That is the victory. That's all that you expected. That's all humanity ever expected. But a few weeks, a few months went by, and sounds began to arise. Life had voices speaking in the victorious camp saying, no, we're not sure what to do, but this is just not acceptable. They did lose, yes, they unconditionally surrendered, but they have got to be held responsible. It went far beyond the bounds of civilized warfare, which is, you can't think about that much because, again, I point out, the point of warfare is to defeat the enemy, and the ultimate defeat, at least on the individual level, if you want to look that way, each soldier is responsible for killing another soldier. No one ever, at least on the victorious side, and they never had on the loser side, they never go back to the soldiers themselves, the actual combatants, and say, you shouldn't have killed the other opposing army, those other guys. Shame on you. I mean, it's ridiculous. That's their job. That's why you are in the army, is to kill the other guy. And his job's to kill you. Nobody's ever questioned that. But here it is. It all seemed to be settled in the way it always had. An unconditional surrender, an absolute, clear-cut victor, and all seemed to be well, based upon what it always been. But then it was though there was a new sign of a progress in the civilizing of man, that they decided we have got to hold the other side responsible. They went too far, at any rate. So that seemed to be part of it. And there was a great hoopla and et cetera, and I won't drag it out anymore, but it was an absolute sign amongst those involved at the time, amongst humanity that paid any attention to such things. It seemed to be a harbinger of a new day. I mean, it was enough that the victorious side was enthused that they no longer had to send off their young men to combat and turn all their physical resources, material wealth into armaments. It's just like it's over. The bluebirds come out and the sun rises and it's a new day. And yet to a few it seemed like, well, it could even be a better day if we could establish something now. This means establish. This is not like the war is over. This means establish. Maybe that's why. Have you ever noticed that all the world's great, I'm talking about the really great, recognized sculptors, all of their works never move? Now, I'm not talking about all these fly-by-night guys that try to chip off some kind of knock off David off some pine stump down in Alabama, but the real sculptors. After some doing, they arranged war trials. And they brought in all they could get their hands on, their highest ranking officers in the losing army. And they brought them into the court of justice, tried them for crimes against humanity, was the general Western interpretation of the charges actually brought. That all of the victorious forces, they combined together, they set up sort of an ad hoc judicial tribunal to try, obviously, the losers, got their hands on the highest ranking officers that survived, and they began trying them, not on the basis that they lost the war and not on the basis of the bloodshed on the battlefield, but on crimes upon the slaughter of civilians, which has always happened, but they did it purposefully, was the claim. The civilians have always been. You just get caught in the crossfire. It's been happening for thousands of years. But they were charged with specifically attacking civilians, which was considered non-sporting. It was considered inhumane, that civilians are not part of the armed conflict. So, that was one thing I want you to consider, that there it was, apparently, humanity is getting pregnant, or is pregnant, and may be delivering a whole new age. It sounds so promising. There are two, for those of you with good ears, there are two really creamy, juicy aspects to this. One of them is that, and of course the aftermath of it, but is the feeling at the time, on a large scale, remember, I mean that's large, a large scale, that humanity is making a real step forward, that it shows that in our combined wisdom, we will no longer tolerate certain kinds of actions. And it almost, again, perhaps defying the contemporaneous interpretations of the people involved, but it seemed to almost put an even stronger or definitive conclusion to the war, because it seemed to even be a harbinger, a potential harbinger of a possibility of maybe no wars in the future, or that humanity would not feel so free to go to war, that we're no longer going to allow ourselves the unbridled permission to just create physical havoc upon one another. So they set up the war trials, and they bring in the highest echelons they can get their hands on from the losing side and try them for these inhumane crimes. Now here's the second part, reminding you one more time, watch your mind. Got no interest in the history of it, that's not even, but here it is. It is life operating at such a level, and the reason I continue to bring it out is, for one reason, is by now you should, well, for now, perhaps you have some encouraging discouragement, some enlightened discouragement, as I was trying to involve you in last time, of looking out to life itself, looking external to you for some great, useful, secret, developmental information. When I point out to you, there is none out there. But here it is showing how life works, and it shows you can look at what life talks about. You can look at life's dreams of the future, and you can learn more about what individually is your potential blossoming of the nervous system than you can from any routine guru, holy man, priest, rabbi, philosopher. How about anybody? They conduct war crimes, war trials. As soon as they bring in the first guy, first general, they have a defense. Nothing strange, nothing unusual. It was a part and parcel of the arrangement of life itself, but no one expected this. Nothing unusual. The first man that they bring to bar, and they say, you know, he was whoever he was, the highest general they could get their hands on, and they read out the charge of all the things that the loser did. Now, he was not the head man. He was just the highest general that they get their hands on, or whoever he was, a major. The rest of them had been killed, committed suicide, disappeared. What was his response? I was only following orders. Which, at first, as I said, it was a surprise that they came up with that. But the idea, the concept is in no way unusual, because that is the muscle, the sinew, that is the glue of any organization, especially in the armed forces, for those of you that may have spent your teen years hiding out in Canada, or before women had the beautiful privilege and the honor to be able to actually be in the army, to be in the army. If you don't know what that is, has always been, that is nowadays it's known as boot camp, basic training. But even in times of extreme warfare, when the king didn't have time to send you through 12 weeks up at Paris Island or somewhere else, the first thing they had to do was to scare the hell, to impress upon you. They had to impress upon you that you were a subordinate wolf, that you were a nobody, which we're a civilized country. As I say, if you got drafted, those of you who missed it, they used to give you 12 weeks of bringing you in, shaving your head, making everybody dress alike, giving you a number, and treating you like, you know, a stray turd on the parade ground, and keeping you up all night, making you do the most ridiculous things, making you pick up, rearrange the gravel in the dry. They do everything they can, and the whole point is, it's been understood for years, is to get you to the place that you will follow any order. Because you've got to have it that way. I'm not attacking the system, you understand. It's not the point, but you understand, it's not a criticism of that. But to use that as a defense was totally unexpected, because that is the heart and soul of the efficiency, of the viability of any army, is to follow orders. Did a major turn around to the sergeant and say, "Sergeant, tell those men to go hit that, Hill 22 over there"? And the sergeant turns around to all the grunts, all the enlisted guys, and says, "All right, hit Hill 22 right there, take it." And they look up, and all they see is a gleam of rifle barrels up there. Somebody may even venture the observation like, "Well, probably, we could all get killed." And the sergeant said, "Yeah, probably." But the point is, they go, take that hill, and you know that there's every chance in the world that you're going to get killed as soon as you stand up. You'll probably get shot, and you'll do it. That is the minimal. It's known as the chain of command, for one thing, but it's the minimal requirement to hold a fighting unit together. It's nothing new. It has always been true. Wolves know it. Everybody knows it. You cannot have each person in the organization, and this, of course, to lesser degrees is true in IBM, non-aggressive, non-militaristic organization. You cannot have every vice president in IBM deciding what will be the company policy. And you certainly, on the battlefield, whether it's a matter continual life or death. You cannot have every little corporal and private deciding, well, wait a minute. Why don't we take this other hill? Why don't we attack over there beside those little trees over there? Where there can only be one general in charge of each company, and there's a chain of command, and that's the whole point of being in there, is you follow orders. Everyone knows that. The winning side knew it, the losing side knew it. They operate on that basis. That in fact, if you do not follow orders, if I must point this out for those of you with non-militaristic background, if indeed you're in the most civilized army in the world, well, there are some. The Dutch, the Danish, they let them wear hairnets, last time I heard. Well, there's some countries in the world, I mean, you people here in Greece, where you think you're the most civilized people in the world because of your history, but at any rate, for those of you who do not know it, to reinforce where I'm getting at with the general theme of this, to not follow orders, even amongst the winners, I mean, amongst civilized army in the world, whatever that would be, to not follow orders is a court-martialable offense. You can be shot. That's been true again for 4,000 or 5,000 years. For a soldier in the time of Greece, all the way up into the last conflict that anybody has been in Western Europe or anywhere, it is a treasonable offense for a sergeant, for a general to turn around somebody and say, all right, boys, go take that hill over there. Go attack. And for one guy to go, I don't want to. He might twice say, soldier, that's a direct order, which everybody in the service knows what that means. He looked at you and he said, soldier, that's a direct order. You go take that hill. And if he doesn't, that is a treasonable offense during time of warfare. You know what that means? You can be shot in the field. You can be tried out there and shot. You can die anyway. But you can say, you'd think, well, my fear of being shot, when he said take that hill, I recognized the danger. That's why I didn't want to do it. But see, the only way, when it gets down to the basic level, to reinforce that, since all soldiers know there's a chance they're going to get killed, your alternative is, if you commit treason by refusing to follow a direct order, you can, in the field, be summarily shot. That's what it amounts to, with hardly anything resembling due process of law. So you can be shot for not following the order. You understand? And so now here they are using as a defense the very thing that did you not do that during time of warfare, you could have been held treasonable. You could have been executed for not doing now what they're using as a defense. I was only following orders. I was only following a willful chain of command in our army. So there they said, all these, I assume they were men with a judicial background, but were in the military and all the various victorious parties. They understood all the ramifications of what I'm talking, what I've just covered with you. That they know as well as anyone that the heart of an army is the blind, faithful following of a lawful command in your army. Lawful command being not by so much the definition, but a general, somebody of higher authority tells you, go do so-and-so. It doesn't have to be take a hill. He just says, go over there and dig a ditch. And you go, I don't want to. He said, soldier, this is a time of war, dig a ditch, or you could be court-martialed, you could be shot. So there they sit and they knew it, and the first guy they bring up and hold him responsible for what he did during time of warfare says, I was following orders. I was simply following a lawful order. I wasn't there, but I know how it went, trust me. They all kind of breathed and went, All of them who smoked wanted a cigarette suddenly, or all who drank wanted to drink. And whoever the presiding judge for the day was went, they just started, but I'm sure he went, well, it's getting kind of almost the dinner hour, let's take a break. And they all had to go out and think, what in the hell is going on? This is still not what you can get of the juiciest part of it. As you might know, if you don't know history, but again, history is not the point. But this became a very well-known event that now, I'm sure in all good history books, takes up some noticeable part during that era, take up 2 or 3 good paragraphs, and I'm sure surely it points out that it was a singular occurrence. It was the first time in the history of civilized man, that one party had held another accountable for what they deemed to be inhumane acts, even during time of warfare. So have given you enough build-up that it seemed to promise a new day. It seemed to be, well, warfare is bad enough, but by God, we're going to have to start drawing the line somewhere. It's going too far, and etc. So they set it up. They get it going. The defense of the people was, I was following orders. They go, wait a minute. I said they start out with the highest one they get their hands on. Might have made the story better if it makes any sense. It shouldn't make any difference to you, but they could have started out with a lieutenant. They could have gone in alphabetical order and called in a lieutenant. And he says, well, I was following orders. And they finally get around to the colonel that was above him. The colonel said, well, yeah, I told him that order, but Major so-and-so told me. They're right. The people involved knew what was happening. As soon as they heard the defense, I was simply following orders, they thought, what can we do with this? Now listen, this is where it gets subtle. This is the difference between, I talked about false labor. The woman's pregnant, but she just thinks I'm about to deliver. I didn't say a false pregnancy. I assume you all know there's a false pregnancy where women, it's claimed, believe they're pregnant. They're not. I didn't say false pregnancy. I said false delivery. That the woman's actually pregnant and she thinks, I'm about to deliver. And it turns out she's not. They thought that this woman was about to deliver. It seemed to be, perhaps even before they got to the hospital, it seemed like, well, this may be a tricky delivery. This may be a troublesome birth because the first guy went, I was simply following a lawful order. And they thought, uh-oh. The kid's coming. I mean, they didn't give up because they'd set up, you're following the parallel metaphor here, I suppose. They had set up this pregnancy. They'd set up the trial. They announced beforehand that the purpose of this, the war is over. They surrendered unconditionally. But that's not the end of it, folks. Here we go. We've got the woman pregnant again. We've got civilization pregnant anew, and she is going to deliver a fresh baby, a fresh day, a day in which there's certain behavior that heretofore we have accepted, even amongst us civilized people. And the losing side had been considered to be a civilized bunch of people. But they decided it was like we have now made civilization pregnant anew. And it's time for the delivery of a new day. A day that at least by one step will be closer to an era wherein there will be no warfare. But we will at least will establish that there's certain limits to the inhumanity that we will tolerate from humans. She's pregnant as hell. I mean, setting it up, deciding to do it. That was the pregnancy. Then they just, without knowing it, they sensed a troubled delivery. When that first guy went, I was simply following a lawful order. Now here is where it gets really subtle. And I said I hadn't looked at a history book, but I'm sure that whole affair of the trials, I'm sure it's listed in an index of any good undergraduate history book. But based upon what it portended, it should take up, let's say, 10 pages. I'm just making this up for a relative thing, and I would just guess that it probably takes up a paragraph of 1 page. Because it did not turn out exactly like anyone expected. The trial seemed to. They convicted some people, they executed some people, put people in prison. But the idea that we will hold people responsible for their actions, and the defense that no, I may have done what you say. That is, but here's the first guy's defense, or all of their defenses. He says, I'm not, whether I did what you say I did or not, My defense is this: I am not responsible because I was doing as I had to. I was following a lawful order, and the tacit thing that he was saying to the court, if he didn't say it or his attorney did, was he was saying to those running that tribunal, which they were all military men, he was saying, as you know, I could have been shot for not doing it. I would have been a traitor. You would have too. Had you not followed any lawful order given you, you guys would have been traitors. You know that? I know that. Therefore, my defense is I was simply doing as I was told. That's when, if they'd been using my metaphor, they'd have thought, God, this pregnancy is, it's going to blow up on us. We don't have anybody prepared to make a delivery as this threatens to be. They are faced with the insurmountable, the unrejoinable. That the defense is the very thing that is the very thing upon which our lives are based, of military men. But here comes the real tricky part. For that moment, for that one situation, they overcame the impossible. They said, no, that won't do. When it will do. They knew it would do. It had to do. Because that's the basis of holding together all militaristic operations, from losers, winners, anywhere in the world. And as I said, any organization, not just armies, but any organization. So here it was, a defense that was actually an indefensible defense, an unassailable defense from a military man that I was simply following orders. But for that ad hoc situation, they overcame it. They could not legalistically deny it. They simply bulldozed over it in a sense and went, no, that's all true. In essence, here's what happened. They went, yeah, that's true. That defense is actually unassailable. As soon as you said that, based upon everything that's happened in the history of humanity for the last 5,000 years, as soon as you said that, we all knew it. We should all look at each other and went, wait a minute, there's no sense us going out of the room. Let's have a show of hands. We're going to have to turn them loose, right? And everybody there, the triers, would have gone, yeah. They knew that. Life knew that. It just ignored it. And in so doing, it seemed at the time, they didn't analyze, I'm doing it for you. It seemed at the time that we have overcome some sort of unacceptable sequence. That we have made, in fact, perhaps a bigger step forward than we imagined. Because we had reached a place that was linguistically, rhetorically, logically out of sequence. We should not have been able to do this, and yet humanity just jumped forward and did it. We found those bastards guilty, forget that it didn't work, forget that their defense was unassailable. We did it anyway. We have made some kind of, we even jumped out of the normal progression of marching along in some sort of our tempo, our pace, progress of humanity. It's like we realized we're getting to a place that was going to give us trouble, and we just jumped forward. It's a new day. You hadn't heard of it since. Oh, it pops up. As a matter of fact, it's popping up right now as we speak. Early 1996. The whole little thing's popping up again. There's a certain little conflict going on, and they're already talking about some of the same civilized powers are now rattling their swords and threatening sooner or later to bring to the bar of justice some of the warring parties and hold them responsible. It sounds like Jiminy Cricket's very kid brother. The point being, again, we're not talking about, the point's not the people and what's going on, but do you understand that at the time this was going to be a big step forward, that they actually were going to shift courses, and it's just almost been forgotten? They still can't do it. Why? Now forget history, forget warfare. Look in your own nervous system. Look at individuals. Why do humans have to externalize the forces that seem to control them? Gods, demons. Why do people with drug habits now, well, they've always done it, but now it's even more acceptable that you blame the pusher. People blame the government. Is what their forces that everyone knows are controlling man. And everyone will externalize it. They will look to the stars. nothing new. They'll look to gods, they'll look to demons. Everyone is following orders. Everyone knows it. It's unassailable. Here it was, you had a whole country, a whole civilization, millions of people represented by the few that they could get their hands on that they tried. But it was like a whole aspect of civilization was on trial, and their defense was, we're following orders. In other words, I'm helpless. The winning side, the other aspect, they knew that's true. All humans know it's true. That's why it's futile to laugh at religion, psychiatry. It is silly. It's dumb. All it does is reflect a sluggishness of man's mental state. Now, I say that from one view, because life is going as fast as it wants to, but compared to what it could be, and not just from my view, compared to what it could be, it's sluggish. And you don't need me or someone else to say, well, it's my opinion. Look at what humanity does. Continual was the point of this. They announce, I'm pregnant, I'm about to deliver. And the delivery is always seasonable. It's always timely. It always sounds like this will be a new day. And everyone's delighted. But it's always, always, during that lifetime, false labor pains. Even when they apparently make a huge jump, a huge shift, which they did, that they found these people guilty, even after they had this unassailable defense of, I was simply following orders. Go back to your own nervous system. Individuals use it. Well, kid's on trial for killing his mother and father. And he says, well, you know, I have my own, you don't know the problems it is being an orphan. You know, it works on me. I have psychological problems. I have voices running me. I have all kinds of phobias. Humanity, the collective humanity, still has not reached the point that anyone can look this directly in the eye, one way or the other. They announce, I'm pregnant, and people can feel it. It's like I was trying to insinuate by the sense of a new day, or things are looking up. But then humanity collectively, continually, is made to announce, I'm about to go, I'm about to deliver, and it's fake. It's false labor pains, and that's the way it goes. They dream further up than they are, but rather than you looking, one of the reasons I was bringing it up, rather than you generically looking for religions or mystical writings to someone else saying, well, here's what people should do. We've all been through it. Anybody that tells you what humanity should do don't have any idea. That doesn't mean they'll lack for followers, because that's the way it's supposed to be. There, for every million wolves, subordinate wolves, there's be only one potential alpha male wolf. Everybody else wants to be told. You figuratively speaking, don't fool yourself if you think, well, everybody wants to be an individual. They talk about it. God, you're an idiot. I mean, you're extremely sluggish if you believe that. Everyone knows that something is in control of their life. Everyone knows they're following orders. They just don't know who. And plus, we can't accept that. Things are not yet arranged so where you can accept it one way or the other. And men have to look off and say, well, it's either not true and we're not going to do it, or they'll momentarily say, oh, well, in your case, maybe. No. And it never goes anywhere collectively. Well, it does go somewhere. Things are changing. But what I tried to get you to see was they set this whole thing, this big trial, and it captivated the headlines and the minds of men there for whatever it took, a few months. And they seemed to bypass the potential roadblock of doing that which had never been done under these specific conditions of a whole military people responsible for their actions, when it's always been an accepted fact that you have got to follow a lawful order. And it's like, no, we're going to have to go past the history of man. We're going to have to go past the established precedents to get to a new day. And it's like humanity kind of pulled themselves up and was able to do it, and found them guilty, hung a few, put them in jail, and that's the end of it. I mean, you understand, it did not set a real precedent itself. It just kind of went, because you cannot. Things are not to the point that you can hold people responsible one way or the other. People know they're not responsible. They don't have an answer for it. So you say, well, my subconscious made me do it. This and that made me do it. Plus, I got to do something else. I received several letters and et cetera, in a sense complimenting me using a kind of a funny story a few weeks back. You remember about the guy that got conned by a cheap suit salesman, was out on the street and having to hold all it, two people passed him. One said, "Look at the shape that poor boy's in, having to hold his sleeves up and all this." And one said, "Yeah, but don't his suit fit nice?" And several people complimented me on the ability to actually make a metaphorical lesson out of that. Several people challenged me to go further. Somebody even wrote me a letter and says, "I dare you, could you go insofar as to take," they considered that to be a joke that I used to start with. Asked if I'd go so far as to use a sexual joke. We're here to face up to a challenge. Here's the story. I will assume first off that all of you people, you always have to, anyway, I assume that all of you people, men and women, I'm going to go ahead and point out, that the male becomes sexually aroused through the blood, more blood going to his penis is what makes it become rigid and erect. I assume you all know that, but you never can tell. It is alleged, there was supposed to be a guy somewhere that was, the word had been passed around, he worked in a bar, he was the bouncer, the bartender, and the word got passed around this one city that he had the world's biggest, longest schlong. And some guys one night got to drink, some high school guys or something, and they kept hearing about him. They called the guy Superman or somebody. So they went down late at night and slipped in and had a few drinks, and they said, "Are you the guy they call Superman?" The guy went, "Yeah, yeah," and they went on. And finally he said, "Is it true you got the world's biggest dick?" And he said, "Well, yeah, some people say it." And they kept on. They had saved their money. So they all pulled in. They said, "Well, look, will you go in the back room? We have saved up. Here's $50. Or what? Would you show it to us? We can't believe. We heard it was just unbelievable." So finally he said, "Well, I'm going to take a break anyway." He said, "Is that all you got?" And they came up, $70 finally. So he said, "All right, come here." So they walked back in the bathroom. They changed, And so he said, "Hold the door." And so he unzipped and took it out. And sure enough, the damn thing, they couldn't believe it. It's like a foot long. Just 18 inches or something. They look and went, "My God." And it's just hanging there. And one of them says, "Jesus, well, if it's like that soft, how big is it when you get a hard on?" He says, "Well," he said, "I can't really tell you. I always black out before the damn thing ever gets to full size." The challenge I was going to undertake is, you don't think I can make a mystical, metaphorical message out of that? How about this? A man's ordinary state of consciousness is like a flaccid mind. It's like your mind, you know what it's like a man just is just dick in its normal condition, just hanging there doing nothing. That's a man's normal mind. But throughout a man's life, your consciousness gets peaked a little bit. There are little things with most men, they seem to get over it, men and women. Now, of course, you understand we've gone into the metaphorical realm, gets little stimulations. Most people get past it by the age of 21 or so, and they no longer worry about it. But it's like the first stages of having something of a non-routine nature, something of even a potential mystical nature, kind of stimulate you. It never seems to amount to anything with people. Why not? And many people try. Not everyone completely gets over it at the age of 21. The world's full of people, even now, that believe they're involved in pursuing the great mystical quest, the great secret work. And you talk to them, and they're never sure whether they've gotten anywhere, or they may admit that they haven't. You forgot how I started this? Am I going to have to do it for you, to take what I just said to set up, and now take the punchline to that joke? What happens with ordinary people's mind? They think, well, I never can see them more than I do. I can listen to something like you, or I can read Buddha, I can read the Old Testament, I can read all kinds of things that seem to inspire me to have a broader conception of what life is, to try and expand my awareness, to try and look at life from a more expansive view. And I try my best, but it's like I can't seem to get anywhere. the blood, ordinary minds, in a sense, black out before their consciousness can ever sufficiently get erected. An ordinary mind can never get a sufficient hard-on to ever get to another state, because the mind itself, you drain the blood away from the ordinary thinking processes, and it's as though a man blacks out. I said a metaphor. I said an allegory. I hope this will be a lesson to you people out in TV land. Don't challenge me. I'm not going to respond anymore after that one.